there, it's Polly here with Mr. Snoots. We're out in the great outdoors because spring has sprung and it seemed a great day just to do something slightly different. That is a West Australian wattle tree in full bloom. I grew it from a seed. So, I had a viewer actually ask if I could do a video on my house rules, particularly for old school D&D. I recently ran old school D&D at a club here, and it was interesting because I actually realised that the house rules that had been evolved as a matter of course amongst, well, particularly my games, but they splashed over into the games of a considerable group of old Melbourneites at the time. There were house rules which were just accepted, and that's not in the game at all. To such an extent, it's such canon that on rereading these rules carefully, it's like, oh, it doesn't say that at all. We put that in. Right, so original Dungeons and Dragons, our little brown books. All hit dice are done on D6, weapon damage is rolled on D6. What I like about it, as I've said before, is that there isn't that much differentiation between character classes. Everyone can have a go at stuff. Everyone can open chests, everyone can open doors, everyone can spot traps. It's just that clerics are very, very much like a fighter, very minor differences, but they do get spells as they go up. They don't actually get spells until like second level. Magic users are not really very weak, they just don't have armor. That was all. So they aren't as vulnerable as they are. However, there were still some things wrong with it. The game, of course, used the old 3d6 characteristic rolls, which had very little effect on the game. Now, of course, when Greyhawk came out, it did put in, the strength bonuses, 1800 and all that kind of stuff. So it did a little to that, but it also didn't really explain essentially how to use them. What are they for? There had to be a characteristic testing mechanism put in. Not mentioned in the game, I assure you. So, first off, we said all characters, you just get maximum hit points at first level. You just do. Player characters just do. It's ridiculous. No one wants to start a game with one hit point. We'll just do it. And in fact, my thing was I have always said, levels 2 and levels 3 as well, you roll twice and take the best. There's some later games that have variants in that, which we will speak of, but definitely get the hit points up. There was a minor thing where fighters have like a +1 hit point at first level, and that is fine. Still didn't, their main thing was the fact that they could use armor and weapons, and this is where it got squirrely, because you could buy weapons. You could buy a two-handed sword, you could buy a dagger, you could buy a mace. Clerics may only use maces, etc. But it made no difference. Every weapon did a d6 damage no matter what, and there was no difference. So why not take a sword and shield if the shield adds to your protection and does the same damage as a two-handed sword? Okay, so we said essentially for small weapons like a dagger, because you could hit someone in the heart or something you're saying, so alright, but let's say for a small weapon like a dagger, you roll 2 dice and take the lowest, and for a heavy weapon like a two-handed sword or a halberd, you will roll 2 6-sided dice and you will take the best. So we finagled it very simply that way. So, it was some simple fixes. But, of course, Basic D&D then came out, the box set Basic. And I actually loved it. That was our preferred game. It obviously immediately replaced actual D&D because it makes way more sense. And this is what the Judges Guild pre-done adventures were largely written to. Things like City State of the Invincible Overlord, Tegel Manor, all these sorts of things which we loved. That's where we lived and indeed still live and play today. So, Basic brought in the use of the different dice sizes and shapes. So there are different dice used for character hit points, and weapons do different dice for damage. All right, so obviously we're going to keep the rules that say first level characters get full hit points and roll twice and take the best for second and third. Oh, an alternative to that one was just roll, and if you don't get at least half what the dice could achieve, then re-roll it. So if you roll a d6 and you get a 3, it's like, nah, bugger it, roll again. 4 or higher, got to have 4 or higher for those hit points. When Greyhawk was there, it had masses and masses and masses of different bonuses for different armor classes, and it was a great idea, but it was flawed because it was kind of like running off the idea, for instance, that armor class 5 was always going to be chainmail, as opposed to that giant beetle over there, which has pretty tough chitin, but it's armor class 5, but that's actually plate, so, you know, why should a mace do more damage on it because it's flexy? So, you know, we ignored all of that stuff. The thing that game brought in was more spells for magic users and so forth, but once you got into the game, you saw that clerics still only got to cast spells at second level. So, left them behind, you didn't feel you had much to do. So there was a little chart that gave you bonus spells for magic users depending on their intelligence. You know, you can get a bonus first level, sometimes you get a bonus second level, sometimes you get a bonus third level spell when starting out. We applied the same chart to clerics, except using wisdom. So clerics could, if they got the bonus first level spell, start out with a first level spell, and it gave them a lot more. Now, a thing that I also noticed was that we always had the thing that clerics do not pre-book spells. Because they are praying for theirs, they're not something they learn, they're just something they have access to. So their spell slots, they can cast any spell they want of that level. So they can cast 2 first level spells a day. They don't have to pre-write it down, they just do it at the time. It's time for healing, it's time for a blessing. You know, they had way more flexibility about that sort of thing. It was just a thing we automatically did. And again, I was researching through rules to see, surely it said that somewhere. No, I think we just put that in. I think we just did that. Both basic D&D, original D&D, and indeed as you get up into advanced D&D, again, you have lots of characteristics, but they don't really mean anything. They didn't do much. So, first off, we had to come up with a way of characteristic testing. What if you want to see if you can just dodge out of the way of something? Surely some kind of test against a characteristic. So the simplest one was to roll a d20 and try and get equal to or less than your characteristic, which, given everyone's very high characteristics, often wasn't perfect, but we would penalise you for wearing heavy armour and so on. So essentially we're saying if you're wearing any armour, if you're carrying a shield or wearing any armour sort of that's heavier than leather, then alright, you're going to get like a -2 off your roll. But if you're wearing plate, you are always going to roll twice and take the worst. So alright, fair enough. It gave us something for when that came up. Other systems were tried, like roll 4d6 and try and get under your characteristics or less. Now, the other thing was that characteristics gave you a bonus to experience. And this just seemed to be weird because it didn't seem to work. You could see what they were trying to do, but it didn't really work. So we just kind of forgot that. We just said, don't bother. We will reward you, channel you into different character classes by having things like you want good wisdom on your cleric, not because it gets you extra experience, but it gets you the extra spells, the extra intelligence, for a wizard allows your wizard to cast more spells. The extra strength on your fighter lets them do more damage, because that's come in as a factor now. And the thief, he gets a slew of skills and so on. And we also gave thieves, like we just said, if something is thievish, if something is like dodging traps and so on, we often told thieves that you can roll twice and take the best. Or we're going to give you a really good, it'll be a saving throw roll you're doing. We'll often give you a bonus, but this is tip of the hat. So right up there we've got a game that's got, these maximized hit points, more spells, and the experience was an interesting thing, because the way Shears wrote, you get a gold piece equals 1 experience point, and you get experience points for killing and nothing else. So you got these ridiculous things where, like, people would, between adventures I want to go work in an abattoir because it says herd beasts are 2 hit dice creatures, so if I kill 100 of those a day I'll get these experience points. So you had to, like, really work on these idiot teenagers to think, no, that's not how that's going to work. And in fact, even as like little 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, what have you, it seemed that the game was rewarding greed and murder. So we changed the way we did experience. First off, no experience for treasure, period. It is its own reward. Treasure allows you to buy better gear. And that's the reward. You started off with your fighter in like chainmail because that's what you could afford. Now you can get the plate mail. Now you might be able to get the field plate, what have you. So that's it. But with that said, in D&D, the rewards for fighting monsters were ludicrously massive amounts of gold. So you started off with, maybe 100 gold pieces. And if you look at people's wages, I'm going to work as a mercenary, you might get a couple of gold pieces a week for that. Now you've killed a monster and you've been given 7,000 gold pieces, because you need that experience under the old system to go up. But as it was, it's like, well, I'll just hire 1,000 mercenaries for a week. It was ridiculous amounts of money. So massively reduce all the monetary rewards you got. Literally, strike out 2 of the zeros, because you needed to keep that down, because part of the thing was resource management, and it was better if that suit of plate is expensive, as it was originally written, and you still find it in the game today. People have a tight budget when they're first laying out their character, and within half an hour of play, that's meaningless. They can go off and buy enormously better armor, enormously better gear, almost immediately. It's not something they have to plan on, and they don't have to worry. They really don't. So by massively reducing monetary rewards back down, we kept it real. We kept it way more accessible. You're not out there buying fleets of war galleys. You're saving up for a good horse and you're taking damn good care of that dungeon mule. It made it real, which was the charm of early D&D. It was shuffling down a corridor in your dented plate armor, with your shield and your sword, just wondering what the hell that noise is you can hear around the next corridor. The thief guy's come forward. He's managed to spend the 25 gold pieces. He's put a mirror on a stick, and he's going to creep up there and try peering around the corner. That was kind of the charm. It wasn't heavy magic. So we put in our own XP system, and we said, what do we want? So we said adventures are a thing. They actually have a point where you overcome the foe. So we said we want to give you experience points for milestones in an adventure, and a milestone might be finding the big clue, freeing that hostage, rescuing that maiden. Those are going to be partial milestones. And we looked at we took fighters as a baseline character, and we said your experience points are going to be around about 1/10 of what it would take to get up to the next level for these major milestones. And then completing an adventure, doing the thing, that was going to get you, depending on how difficult it was, 2 or 3 times that. So at the end of a really cool sort of adventure, you were probably going to be about between a third to a halfway up to your next level. And we sort of ran with that, to be honest. We wanted you to have a much harder time going up later. So again, we kind of halved that down once you got to about third level, because 3 was kind of like the magic slot, partly because that was what was covered in basic D&D, but also once you'd gotten to level 3, you weren't just instantly dead the moment anything hit you. You were starting to be able to take some risks, so you had to work for it. We also gave you those milestone points were for things like discoveries. So finding that ancient ruined city, following that amazing map through, and discovering the lost galleon and so on. Discovery was a major thing, and what this did was it made players really engage in what we thought of as adventure, going out and exploring new vistas, doing that stuff from Conan books where you're actually exploring new places, encountering new things. You become far more wandering adventurers as opposed to looters and murderers. So it really put a different emphasis on the entire game. How you choose to reward the players or reward the player characters will govern how the play runs. That was the game we wanted. Now, when Advanced D&D came out, obviously characters changed a bit, but we kept all of these rules in place. And that was pretty much how we ran. This has remained what we play ever since. A fudged experience system, those extra spells for clerics, maximize hit points at first level, and either double rolls or roll at least half of what your maximum is, for second and third levels. And ruthlessly keeping the money down. Absolutely ruthlessly keeping it down. You have to keep people with very limited cash in hand. Otherwise, it's really hard to honestly get an adventure going. Hackmaster, they made a whole joke of it, where they had a 2-page spread at one stage, and it was this massive expedition, and there's and then it's got like a picture, and then on the other side it's got these guys done as outlines with numbers telling you what they are, and there's the hired cleric to repair the player character's hit points. There's the hired sage to fill you in on all the clues. There's the hired scouts to scout the way ahead of you. There was the servant to look after your gear. There was the hired chronicler to chronicle your adventures. There was the groom to look after your horse. There was you've got half a dozen hirelings with bows and so on to support the main character. And there was I think he's even got the hired assassin to protect him against other assassins. And somewhere in the middle of all this mess, there was like a guy in plate armor just being carried along by a bunch of guys. And that's the player character. And that was honestly what you could do. You could hire that many characters as hirelings, henchmen, hangers-on, that it was ridiculous. So that was sort of the essence of how that ran. Haven't had to do so many fudges, of course, as you got to D&D 3rd edition and higher, which we sort of plunged into. But after much play, I was one of the first people to ever run a D&D 3rd campaign, because I got given the pre-release version of the game because I was doing the novels. So we actually ran the first campaign, and indeed, one of my players was the first person to ever actually be physically attacked and killed by a rust monster. Rust monsters in all previous editions did no physical harm to anything. They just rusted metal. But now they have a 1D bite. And this guy got bitten to death by a rust monster that he insisted on fighting, and so it slowly crumbled all of his stuff away and nibbled him nigh unto death. Something we found pretty damn funny. So, but yeah, we sort of abandoned 3rd and definitely 4th and definitely 5th, as we found that the power spiral. There was a shift in the game that turned it into a game about amassing powers that build upon powers, and it shifted the emphasis on killing again. Just killing, and definitely the things you're up against don't have the ability to face you down. So again, the game sort of lost its charm and became a superhero bullying game. Don't really like it. So that's kind of where our D&D is. We of course moved on to do other systems for combat and so on, and they were their very own game designs. Long campaigns over many years done with totally homebrew systems, often going to a 2D system, because the thing that we actually moved into very quickly, pretty much abandoning D&D for, was Traveller. And that 2d6 system, where you're trying to roll 2d6, score an 8 or higher to succeed. You have a skill, which is a number, and that skill adds to your dice roll. Traveller also, as originally written, had characteristics which didn't really influence the game. So we put in rules that gave you bonuses for characteristics, because it's with 2d6 characteristics, so anything that's 9 or higher, 9 or 10s gets a +1, 11 or 12s gets a +2, and God help you if you're in the higher hexadecimal bands, so 13 to 15s, you get a +3 on a dice roll for something that influences. Now, for melee weapons, that was going to be damage. For dexterity, that's going to influence firing weapons, but also finagling your way in melee combat, and so on. Education is going to be for rolls on sciences and knowledge, and actually engineering skills and so forth. Likewise, intelligence was for figuring out problems, and we also used it for sort of perception, for spotting traps, spotting things, figuring out something weird about the local ecologies. We dumped the main combat system in original Traveller the moment the game Striker came out. It had a much clearer version of the Traveller game. And the current versions of Traveller that you will find where armor subtracts from damage, they have their roots there. So we switched to a system where armor soaked damage from incoming weapons, because it was just much clearer than the system that was in the original game. We had to roll to penetrate, and there are 101 factors to figure out. But that core Traveller thing, the character generation, while it's very funny to have people, drop dead, as they brought out supplements like Mercenary and so forth, military characters massively outstripped everyone else in the number of skills they got. So we just did hard rules. We essentially said, we're saying that your character, let's forget how old they are, we are going to say, just give yourself 12 skill points that come from the career lists you've chosen. That's it. And if you're choosing a skill level of 3 or higher, that counts as 2 skills. So to buy level 3 combat rifleman skill, which all these idiots are going to do, is going to cost you 1 point for the first, 1 point for the second, and 2 points for the third. So 1, 2, 4 points, and up it goes. And again, I think we just had a hard limit for starting characters. It's like, you can only have one skill that's like 4 or above, because you'd always get some stupid bastard, fat bastard in fact, who would want to just take, it's combat rifleman 91, and it's like, fine, you're a hyper specialized idiot that just shoots people. That's going to be wonderful in the kind of games we run, where you could be just turning up in these amazing and alien environments and just trying to figure out how to survive, how to get off here, or how the hell to communicate with what seems to be a walking tree. But that core mechanic from Traveller became our game of choice for virtually anything. If someone wanted to do a one-off scenario, be it a horror, a medieval adventure, and so on, we would use modified Traveller rules for it, because it was simple, it was robust, everyone knew how it worked, easy to do, fantastic set of rules. So nowadays we're seeing things like Cepheus do effectively this. they have encoded that. The other game, actually the other old school game that we had to house rule the living crap out of, it was Gamma World. Now I adore Gamma World. I love the setting. It was the first big campaign that I ever really ran. There was a D&D campaign I had that ran for years and years, but Gamma World was kind of my real love. And first edition Gamma World is the best. The artwork is charming, absolutely charming. Oda's artwork, and it's just lovely. But there's a problem. They took their weapon damage from Dungeons and Dragons. And so, a sword does a D8. Bafflingly, a crossbow bolt does a D6. Apparently no one's ever seen anything shot by a crossbow, but what the hell. However, they said your hit points were, you're rolling one, I think, D6 for each point of Constitution you have. Now, Constitution was a characteristic that was rolled on 3d6. Your average is going to be somewhere in the 9 to 12 bracket. Let us say 10. So you're rolling 10 d6 for Joe average character. So that is going to be, what, 35 to 40 hit points that character can just generally be expected to have. Leading to the ludicrous thing where you could stroll across a town square while people are firing crossbow bolts at you, and well, you know, if you've got 10d6, then you can afford to be hit by 10 crossbows before you drop dead. So, 10 crossbow bolts plunging into your chest cavity, bursting out through both lungs, severing those arteries, and winging off into the distance. Nah, what do I care? Well, these guys can never actually harm me with a crossbow bolt. You're sitting in the tavern. Suddenly a guy leaps in the door. He's got a crossbow bolt. It's pointed right between your eyes. Says, "Freeze, sucker!" Says, "What do I care? I just dance around." What? Yeah, I just dance around. Oh, he shoots you. Good. The most damage he can do to me is 6. I have about 60 hit points. I could give a crap. So yes, that had to be changed. So we actually said, first off, the all of the weapons get exploding dice. So if you roll maximum dice, then you roll again, and if that rolls maximum, you still roll again. So that meant they were way less predictable, and what we said was that your hit points are equal to your constitution, with a bonus if you have high strength. The same bonus you got on attack rolls also goes onto your hit points. So Big and Butch does make you able to absorb damage, but it wasn't ridiculous. For the lasers and so on, we generally struck the 0 off the end of the damage, because you had 40 or 50 or 60 or 100 hit points, high-tech weapons, so here you go, a crossbow does a d6, but a laser pistol will do something like, it would do something like 16d6 damage or something. What? Oh, okay, I can see that. So, yeah, we just essentially cramped that the way down. We just looked at what they were trying to do with it. Essentially, there were like laser pistols and rifles, there were blaster pistols and rifles, and there was the dreaded black ray gun, which you just have to do a saving throw against death, otherwise you drop dead if you are an organic life form. Great. So, pretty much we just put in our own damage for the energy weapons, but the most dangerous thing about the energy weapons was we just said they ignore all armor except for high-tech armors designed to keep them out. So if you're wandering around in your leather suit or in your piece metal armor made from bits of old wreckage nailed onto a leather backing, and someone fires a blaster at you, it just doesn't care what you're wearing. A much easier idea. And that made the game playable, because without it, it was ludicrous. Other than that, a brilliant game. So that's really the old school mods that we had to do, and kind of had to, because we wanted more out of the games than as written. Like I said, in D&D we particularly wanted that experience guidance that made for a game that wasn't focused just on killing and stealing. We wanted something that to us was adventure, which was finding new places, making amazing discoveries, daring doing rescues, great character moments. When you had a fantastic idea, we gave you experience. We'd say that's kind of half a milestone. So, if someone came up with a fantastic way past this guy. Someone does that thing and there's a fantastic quip at the end of it that gets you all laughing. Yeah, fine, you get experience with that. And it made play so much more engaging. People played their characters, people played their backgrounds, people went exploring, people got that map, they traveled to that far island, they climbed that volcano. It was a much better game. Have a think about a lot of the games you play, actually, about how you are guiding play. I think that's very important. So anyway, those are the mods that we did. I still play these, that's still my game. And I just finished a original D&D campaign, or rather it was that splice of Basic and Advanced. It was actually Labyrinth Lords. That was a 7-year campaign, which was for a single player who was running multiple characters, and that was amazing. And there are little things like I published an adventure, Wolf's Head Tour, which is actually my original high school dungeon, just kind of clarified and rewritten from all the wonderful notes on the back of business pads swiped from my dad's office, written in 15-year-old biro handwriting. That campaign is actually still a living campaign. It has been played continuously since 1979, 78. Still in play today. It gets trotted out a few times over any given year, and it's appeared in novels. It's like so those games, that mini-maxing, all that sort of massaging the rules to make a better game and so on, still lives. And I highly recommend with any game that you make it your own. Certainly play it as written, but then ask yourself if this is how you really want the game to be, and see if there's anything that you can massage to make it your own. There is a habit at the moment of these kind of tournament plays and paid sodding DMs. I despise that idea, but this has led to a homogenization of games and a culture where no one will dare do house rules, because that means you can't just pick your characters up that one person's been running for you, in one game run by one DM, and just take it into another and flawlessly run them, because the rules are so rigid. It has to always run the same way. You couldn't do that in earlier days because everyone had the damn house rules. You just couldn't go from one campaign to another. It generally didn't work. But yeah, there is that kind of paid DM culture. I've got these characters, we've had them in different DMs campaigns. It's like that does lead to you being told, no, you cannot make your own rules. I suggest you go back to it. And if your ideas are radical, then that means you're actually making so many changes, you're pretty much designing your own game, which is kind of what this was all about. The original games culture in the 70s was all about doing your own stuff to share with your friends. You don't have to make $1 million at it. In fact, I assure you, you won't make $1 million at it. But if you cook up something really cool that works for you and your friends, then it's always worthwhile just putting it out there on drive-through so other people can enjoy. Anywho, in fact, it is Saturday, so we will go and play some games. And hopefully I see you around a games table sometime. All right, much love.